So I got a lot of feedback from you guys, and I'm super excited to tell you guys about my Teach for America experience. So the first thing I wanted to start off was kind of explaining what Teach for America is. And Teach for America, in my opinion, is like a teacher boot camp, right? And what it is meant to do is take college students who are trying to kind of find their way and place them into the classroom, put them through this teacher boot camp to place them into the classroom in order to kind of create that diversity, representation, and all of those type of things into the classroom. Now, I would say Teach for America it has the right idea, but definitely the wrong process. So, you start by doing an application, and the application is, a basic, almost like a job application. Um, and then once you are selected, if you are selected, you go through kind of a weeding out process where you have to teach a sample lesson. Now, when you are teaching the sample lesson, there are a bunch of YouTube videos and just all of these different things to kind of show you how to do your lesson in order to be successful and get in. At the time, I didn't know this. I had tutored, I had asked a couple of people what to do, and that was literally all I had going in the door when I went for my interview. You usually are doing something really basic, nothing too complicated, just off the strength of you are trying to do a lesson in like 10 minutes. So it's not anything heavy. It's not like you're doing a calculus lesson or anything like that. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, the interview process was like a 6. And I would say that because I'm a naturally anxious person. So if you're someone who is confident or has taught before and you're thinking about doing Teach for America, I believe that it'll be more of a breeze for you. Me being fresh out of college, had no teaching experience whatsoever besides tutoring, I was kind of intimidated going into the interview. So apparently I did well enough to get accepted, and you don't have a lot of time to make a decision. I believe it was like a month tops that I had to make a decision on whether or not I wanted to accept my offer into the program. So, okay, here's where things get a little bit complicated. While you are doing the application and after you have been selected, you have to choose, I think it was like your top 10 places where you want to be placed. So, here are kind of the logistics of the way Teach for America works. Teach for America wants to place these teachers in low income, minority demographic schools. So your choices are in those areas, right? So you choose your top 10 choices. Um, and again, this is something that I didn't know when I was doing the application. But if I were you, I would definitely look up the salary of teachers in the location that you are choosing for like your top three. I would look up your top three, and then I would also look up like living expenses and different things like that, because where you are placed, you are committed to 2 years in working in that area. Now, do you have to stick to the same school? No, you don't even have to stick to the same district, but you are obligated to complete your term with Teach for America for that 2 years by working at a school at that location. So I chose my top 10 locations. I would say I tried to keep them close to home because I wanted to still be near my family, not too far away. But I also chose, once it got down to like 5 through 10, I chose some places that were pretty far away, specifically based off of the environment and my personal preferences. From there, you are required to give them information about basically how much money you have. They're asking how much is in your account, how many assets do you have, your savings account, any type of income that you have, you are to report it because that determines your grant and transitional fund money. Now, what this means is TFA gives you two different funds. One amount is grant money. That is the amount that you do not have to pay back. You can use it towards whatever expenses you need to move to this location. The other amount is an optional loan. So with that money, you can use it towards the same things. But there are a lot of things to keep in mind. So you have these two different sets of funds, and you want to make sure that you are using the money wisely because you have from the summer program all the way up until you receive your first check from your job to use these funds. You need to relocate, you need to pay first and last, you need to get furniture in your house, you need to turn on all your electricity, all of those type of things. So all whatever sum they give you is what you are to use. So personally, I was a college student. I was working part-time to put myself through college. By the time I was graduating, we was scraping for change, honey. We was scraping for a change. I did not have too much of anything in either my checkings or my savings account. We're not even gonna talk about my spending habits in college because that'll be a whole nother video. So, at the time I was in Nashville, Tennessee, I had got chosen to relocate to Kansas City, Missouri. So I was totally fine with that because I'm from Illinois, not too far from home. Fine, right? But I also had to travel to Houston, Texas for 5 weeks in order to do the summer program that they had for us to complete. Now, I had to fly home because I was graduating from college, or I had to drive home, fly home, whatever. I had to drive from Nashville to Illinois and, bring all of my things home. From there, I had to travel from Illinois to Kansas City. No, from Illinois to Houston in order to do the summer program. I had to travel from Houston back to Illinois because I had nowhere to stay in Kansas City yet. And I had to, once I was in Illinois, I had to find where I was going to stay in Kansas City and move there within a couple of weeks so that I could interview for schools. So just roughly estimate in your mind how much that would have been. Now, of course, we have the pandemic and inflation to account for when we think about prices. So I would say it's not as expensive. It was not as expensive then as it would be to do now, but it was still expensive. So I would say in grant money, I probably got about 2 to 3 grand, and in loan money, I got another 2 grand. Now, I still had to eat. I still had to take care of my, personal hygiene and all of those different things. So, this wasn't a lot of money to live off of, but being a college student, I knew how to work with a small budget, right? So I'm just giving it to y'all how it is. They're not giving you a lot of money to work with. And if they do give you a lot of money, they want it back. Now, the weird thing that I found out later on in the program was that people who were moving from Tennessee, maybe Chattanooga, to Nashville were getting like 10 grand. And so somewhere in there, it wasn't making sense how TFA kind of distributed the funds for transitional reasons. I just didn't understand it. It was people that were staying with their parents, had nice bank accounts, and they were getting $1,300, $14,000, $10,000, and I was just like, how? That was grant money they didn't even have to pay back. So I was definitely confused, highly confused when I started, talking and making friends and finding out, how how much they were getting and how they were able to get to Houston and cash out. It was people down there cashing out on TFA. Just be honest. Because they were staying with their parents and they were going to go home and work from their parents' house. And so they weren't, occurring any transitional funds. They didn't have to worry about rent or anything like that because they were moving to their hometown or something like that. So it was definitely a little weird when it came to those transitional funds. Another thing about TFA is the summer program that I have mentioned many of times already. So the summer program is a 5-week program where it's basically teacher boot camp. Now, I do not take away from TFA when it comes to that teacher boot camp. That's hardcore. So you are spending, I would say, 12-hour days for 5 weeks, getting up probably about 6 o'clock in the morning, getting on the bus probably about 6:30, going to whichever school you're teaching at. And I don't know if all of the summer programs are hosted in Houston or what. Anyway, you get on a bus, you go to the school where you are going to be teaching, and you teach for half a day. So you probably teach from about 7 to 1 ish. So from there, you do like community building, DEI training, and we'll talk about that for sure, as well as some other, activities, PD type style things in the afternoon. Then you're bused back to the Houston Institute is where we stayed, the college campus. And there you do from about 3 to 7, you are doing even more PD training, type style activities with your colleagues who are also in Teach for America. So I do not discredit Teach for America in that way. A lot of teachers feel like they can discredit Teach for America alumni because we didn't do student teaching. Those 5 weeks were brutal. Not brutal as in, I don't know. It's not brutal as in like the kids were terrible or anything like that. It was brutal as far as being able to focus for 12 hours a day on educational content, being able to learn classroom management in 5 weeks, being able to learn how to lesson plan, how to do a scripted and a non-scripted lesson plan, how to view yourself teaching and critique yourself and take critique from other educational experts. I mean, it was like brutal. Mentally, it was just a big transition and not a lot of time to acclimate to this new environment. So, one thing I will critique about the summer program is the ethics involved in how we were prepped to be teachers. So, yes, this is a summer boot camp, but for some students, this is their summer school, right? And so, the students that we were teaching were real students that I determined whether or not they went on to the next grade. Me, a college student, fresh out of college, never taught before. I was the determining factor. That's a lot of pressure. Now, don't get me wrong. There are teachers that are fully qualified that probably shouldn't be the person to determine whether or not your child goes to the next grade, whether it's because of biases or whatever the reason may be. I completely understand that. But I did feel some type of way hopping in front of these students knowing I didn't know what I was talking about. At least 50% of the time. So what would happen is we would get our lesson from Teach for America. Like they would create the lessons for us and it would have some type of script, but we weren't required to stay on script. We were required to stay on pace, right? So when it comes to pace and when it comes to teaching time, these are all things that I had to learn. I had to learn how to make anchor charts. I had to learn um, how to create creative like icebreakers and things for me to bond with my students within the first couple of days and for my students to bond with one another. So at the time, the demographics of the school that I was teaching at was mostly Hispanic, so there was also like a language barrier that a lot of students struggle with. So ethically, I did feel some type of way. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. It was like, dang, am I doing them an injustice? Like, I'm getting up here, I don't know anything about them, their culture, their background, and I'm trying to teach. So it was a lot of responsibility on me to do my research, right? And to bond with them as much as possible. Um, Thankfully, part of my core members were also of Hispanic backgrounds or Latina communities, and I was able to kind of learn from them as well. So in the sense of community building, it was just like college. Like you're thrown in the fire with other people who are also thrown in the fire with a little bit of money, and you got to make it work. A little bit of money, a little bit of resources, you got to make it work. You're on the bus 7 o'clock a.m. making anchor charts. Ain't nobody talking. You're on the bus in the morning, 7 o'clock a.m., reading through your lesson plans and your script, making sure you know everything. Because once your bus gets to that school, you're on. The camera's on you. Lights, camera, action is your time to shine. Now, I did have a co teacher, so we would switch back and forth between reading and math. I believe I started off teaching reading. Mm. I am not a reading teacher by default. I didn't realize that because it was my own favorite subject. But as you mature as a teacher, you realize that just because you like to do something doesn't mean you like to teach something. So, fun fact. So, from there, I think the summer program was just, it definitely prepared me to be a teacher. It definitely put me on the right track when it comes to hustling and grinding and last minute preparations. All of those things were spot on when it comes to preparing whether or not I was prepared to go into the classroom, right? So from there, I went back home probably for a couple of weeks, and then I had to go to Kansas City to find me somewhere to live. So I looked up a lot of different places. I had to do a lot of my own research on communities within the area that I had to move to. I had to do a lot of my own research and reach out to the people in my core that were from that area when it comes to where to stay, where not to stay, prices within my price range. And I had to base what I could afford off of a job that I hadn't even gotten an offer for yet. So at the time, I didn't have a job offer when I was looking for my apartment. I had to secure an apartment with hopes that I would be making enough money to cover my rent. So that was something that was very uncomfortable. But if you come from a background where you're able to go with the flow, or you're really flexible, or you can grind, it's not that hard. So I went to Kansas City a couple of weekends to kind of check it out, view the area, find me somewhere to stay. And because that's where I was going to be located, TFA had a couple of different events for me to mingle with other TFA alumni and kind of network, right? During this time, I met some amazing, amazing people, some of the people who are still my friends to this day. So I have no complaints about my move to Kansas City or about the opportunities that were presented. I do want to kind of speak to the division amongst the core members. So earlier I kind of spoke to the DEI training that TFA requires you to be a part of, that was uncomfortable for so many reasons. For one, again, representation matters in the classroom, and TFA knows that. TFA is trying to put teachers into classrooms where they need quality teachers that care, that can relate to their experience, that understand the culture, etc., right? Yet, I would say my core was about 70% Caucasian, 10% Asian, 10% African American, the other, etc., right? So, I'll say 60% Caucasian and throw another 20% in there for Hispanic and, Latino backgrounds. So, at the end of the day, the majority of the core members in TFA are Caucasian. But the majority of the places where you are going to be placed as a TFA core member is in the hood. You're going to be with some black kids. You're going to be with some Hispanic kids. You're going to be with some Asian kids. You're going to be with minorities for sure. That's the purpose of TFA. So, what they try to do in order to accommodate for the large amount of Caucasians that I guess come through the program is a DEI program. And so if you've ever worked for any company at this point, I'm sure you have some type of experience with DEI training. Now, our DEI training was a little bit more intense than your average DEI training, because it's almost like you can't put a country Caucasian person in the hood and expect them to not freak out, right? So this was pretty intense DEI training. Some of these trainings had a lot of tears, had a lot of arguments, had a lot of heated conversations. There would be times where we would be split, minorities and white people, and we would have very uncomfortable conversations that would deem ridiculous to me. I am very aware of how to treat all people with kindness. I don't have a problem with that. So it seemed very redundant. It seemed very throw your struggles in your face. Tell us about your experience about being a minority. How bad does it suck to always talk about slavery? Like that was the vibes, and it was very annoying to say the least. And then you would have to come back full circle with everyone and hold hands and sing kumbaya while white people cried tears of, I'm afraid of white black people and black kids and black mothers going off on me, or I'm afraid of how these black people are going to perceive me when I come into their classroom. They're not going to immediately love me, and that's what I expect, right? And that's just real. It was very annoying. It was very triggering. It was very roll your eyes and eat your Twinkie and shut up for me. That was just my personal experience. So within the core, you can definitely tell the division of white people to the minorities. The minorities stuck together. Black people hung with black people. The Hispanics hung with the Hispanics. The Asians hung with the Asians. And sometimes it was like high school. And sometimes we would all interact with one another. But it was very clear at so many moments who was not going to be successful in their environment once they were placed into a classroom with a classroom full of 97% black kids or 97% Hispanic kids. So I moved to Kansas City and I started my job at a location that I still to this day loved. If you have not watched my last video about why I quit being a teacher, definitely check it out, because I speak to how much I loved my first teaching position. I started off teaching 4th grade, And honestly, I thought I was prepared. I really did. I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. I definitely had good ideas. I had good training. But there's a lot to learn within that first week of school when it comes to pacing, when it comes to helping students out. I was always late to lunch, always late to recess, always late for dismissal, and I would stay after school cleaning up after the kids every day for about 3 weeks straight. From there, I had to learn how to collaborate, how to listen to my other team members in order to learn how to better serve my students. So, another commitment of TFA is on Saturdays you have mandatory professional development. They don't really tell you what happens if you don't come, but I learned that out later. I found it out later what happens if you don't come. And I'm going to tell you guys. If you do not come, they try to strip you of your TFA member, whatever, because you didn't complete the right amount of hours. I will say that at the time, it was the beginning of a pandemic and I was pregnant. I didn't want to go anywhere. And so that was why I almost didn't fulfill my hours of professional development with Teach for America. However, we were able to work something out and I was able to complete officially and claim my alumni status that I earned. So, all in all, I would say it's definitely a good experience. I definitely would recommend TFA to someone else, but I wanted to give you guys kind of a clear view of what that experience looks like because I don't think they do a good job at letting you know what that experience looks like. Now, one of the reasons why I felt like the summer school was unethical was a lot of times we would teach a lesson and then in that afternoon professional development we would learn all the things that we did wrong in that lesson and we would be told how to do them right theoretically the next time or hypothetically once we were in our classrooms. In my opinion, the PD should be first and the summer school should be second because we shouldn't use students as guinea pigs to practice teaching on and have that be their summer school experience and or have that be their determining factor for whether or not they were going to the next grade. I just didn't think that was right. A lot of times I would teach a lesson and I would go to PD and I would be like, you mean I could have did this? I could have helped so many students. And if you're passionate about what you do, as I was, you would be frustrated with that because why didn't you give me the tools I needed to succeed prior to my lesson? Duh. So it was frustrating, I will say that. But all in all, I found my passion. I found what I love to do. I never was in it for the money. I was always in it for the students. I still have notes that students wrote me from that summer program that I look back at when I'm having a rough day, and it definitely makes me grounded. It makes me realize that I'm in the right profession. I saw students go from not speaking a lick of English to not being quiet, wanting to talk every day to me. I saw students go from depressed to happy in my classroom. I saw students go from having no friends to being popular in my classroom. Those moments, those progressions and blossoming moments are the most beautiful things, and kids are the purest human beings on the planet. So, all in all, TFA helped me realize my life passion. It connected me with some of my best friends. It still is helping me to this day when it comes to networking, when it comes to speaking to people, building my confidence as a teacher. All of that started with TFA. So I don't knock it. I just think they should be a little bit more real when it comes to what's what. And so that was the point of this video. I hope you guys enjoy, and comment below what else you want to hear about, because I have nothing but time to talk to y'all about it. So have a great day, guys.